Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Just me here. It's 10:20 at night before this drops, sitting in the podcast/office studio, and here with my pet Squee. And it's a lovely night here in Los Angeles. Feeling optimistic for once. Maybe it's because this episode today is so good. This is Elina Löwensohn, actress that I just think the world of in a number of my favorite films. And if you don't know who Elina is, why don't I read you her bio right now? Originally from Bucharest, Romania, actress Elina Löwensohn emigrated to the U.S. as a child under somewhat harrowing circumstances. We talk about it a little bit today on this episode. She studied acting and started performing in theater productions in New York and was hired by Hal Hartley after he saw her in a play. She starred in a number of his films, including Simple Men, Amateur, and Flirt, and in the last 30 years has acted in everything from Schindler's List to Seinfeld to Basquiat to A Very Long Engagement, and this is just a small sampling of her work. Most recently, Elina starred in the excellent experimental sci-fi film After Blue, Dirty Paradise, which it's tough to find. It's not streaming in the United States. You can rent it like I did on Apple. Not that I'm not endorsing them. Yes, my wife does work on a show on Apple TV. And okay, so they do offer, I think, the lowest prices of all the streaming services for renting things. Anyway, the point is, you can see it in the United States, and I recommend you do. This was just lovely. Elina is very open and very forthcoming, and what a story from, her father survived the Holocaust. They escaped communist Romania to come to the United States. Woo! And we start out with a lengthy discussion of how the dawning dystopia is affecting both the United States and Europe, and some of the things we say might surprise you. Surprise me. I just assume everything outside the United States is stable in some way, but maybe that's just a fantasy that I have created for myself as a way to escape the deterioration of daily life here. And honestly, look, my daily life is pretty simple, considering I don't do much besides write and make podcasts. Anyway, if this is your first episode of Beginnings, thank you for listening. What I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like today's guest. She's an actor. Why? Maybe you like my talks with other actors. I've been doing this show for 13 years. Or hey, you know what? Elina was in a lot of Hal Hartley films. I talked to Hal Hartley. I think that was back on episode 100. So that was a while ago. I remember going to his office in New York. That was a treat. But I've talked to a ton of actors, Brita Wool and Britt Lauer recently from Severance, Halle Pfeiffer, Adam Pally, Gerard Carmichael, DeWanda Wise, Aisha Tyler, and a ton of other people, a ton of writers and authors and musicians and comedians. So check out those episodes if you like what you hear. Why not subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from? I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. And recently I started a free philosophy Substack called The Slow Dystopia, which you can find at theslowdystopia.substack.com. Coming up, I have a lot of great talks, including, well, speaking of actors, Emma Pates from the sadly canceled too soon Pennyworth show. She's fantastic in that. A.V. Tare, just talked to him, and that was cool. Farrell Dalrymple, the wonderful comics creator. So stay tuned for those episodes. But for now, let's talk to Elina. All right, everything's going well.
At least right now.
At least right now. Yeah. Hey, look, in the modern world, if everything goes well for at least a minute, I'm thankful.
Exactly.
Are you in Paris? Are you working or do you live there now?
I live. I work and I live. my relationship with France, Paris, began in 93, but I really moved and started living full time in 1996. Because between 1993 and 96, I used to do half and half between New York and Paris. Very chic and very wow, as long as you work.
Right.
So my ex-husband is an artist, visual artist, and me as an actress. At a certain moment, we had to take a decision. And he said to me, either we go to because we couldn't. I wasn't working. I had a period at a certain point there, actually later, but I can't remember the period because I'm confused with dates because it's been a while. But a certain period where I wasn't working, or I was even depressed because I couldn't find a community of colleagues and friends, and it takes time at a certain age. Yeah. And I started my relationship with France at 27. So it wasn't like I was in 21 or 22, which is another thing. So he said to me, either we make the decision to go to New York because you seem to, be so depressed because you're not there anymore and so on, as much as you would want or whatever. So we go. He needed a studio to paint. So because you need rent for a studio, this means in an apartment, we would have to have roommates. And I was 30, I remember, 30, 31. Or he said, we stay in Paris, and he was going to try to get a job as a teacher already difficult to get a job as a teacher in art school, a good art school. And I felt in myself that all my life since I left my mother, going to NYU and I don't know what, once I left home, let's say, I always lived with roommates. I was very lucky because they're all like very close friends already. So it was like living with close friends, but still roommates all the time. And I felt like at 30 or 31, and since I met Philippe at that time, I just wanted to live not with roommates again. So I said to him, well, let's stay in France. And he got a job. And then it started like 7 years of, it took a long time for me to create an environment where I felt it was home. And it happened. I go all over the place, as you see. I can start my story already in the middle of it, but I'll stop so that you can ask me what you need to ask me.
No, I love it. It's also, you kind of got out of America at the right time, right? So like as the 21st century hits, we start going downhill while everything else there are other places that are, but like
here it's going downhill too. In certain ways. First of all, the war. And I think this war, even though it's closer to France than America, this is what's amazing, like the COVID. It influences now, we're all related, we're all connected. So either it is a catastrophe or something good to benefit from, we're all connected. I don't know about Africa and other places, but I guess they are also suffering because of the war in Ukraine. I'm sure, because I don't really read the news, but I'm sure that there's some sort of impact on them too. And here, besides the war and the problem with the gasoline, or that they say that they're going to cut off the electricity, or I don't know what, which they didn't yet. But okay, the swimming pools, the public swimming pools, the water is colder than usual. I don't go, but this is what I heard. But I was just talking to an American friend just before, and because I have an old mother who's all alone in Massachusetts, and I was saying to my friend, next year, for example, I'll be doing a play, which will take a long time. Not just to do, but the touring. And that means that if my mother gets sick or something really bad happens, like a stroke, like she's had already, I cannot come. And I have no idea what happens in that case. She has no one. absolutely no one. She's completely alone. What happens? Do they bring her to the hospital and then they bring her to a nursing home? I have no idea because I will not be able to get out of the thing. Anyway, and this friend who's she's a private sort of nurse, she was saying to me that the system in America of nursing and doctors is really breaking down. But this is what's happening here. Supposedly they all are striking. They're not enough doctors and nurses, but here too. So I was thinking, wow, why is that? I just, all of a sudden I was like, this is not about Ukraine. It's about the nurses and doctors. So it's breaking down here too, like in America.
But is there, okay, so this, at least in my mind, there's at least a baseline of civility, or a baseline of, like, in post-war Europe, at least like England has the NIH. There is in France, there is a, like the yellow vest. There was like if you take away a kind of like civil things, people will react in a way that in America, they just like accept it and then just get angry at the wrong things.
This I never understood how that worked, because it's true that when I arrived in France, I quite quickly realized the reaction of people, because the first thing was the subway strikes, and that there's no subway or bus, public transportation. They strike all the time, or semi-strikes, meaning not total, but where you cannot get around, or you can get around, but it's very difficult. There are all the time, or the trains. This I realized immediately because it's so often. And I was thinking, it's interesting that in America, they don't do that. However, the Union for the Actors in America, whether it's the Theater, Equity, or SAG, it's much stronger than here. So, but about the striking, is true. I don't know why, what the system is. Are they more private than public? But having said all that, one reality is I'm very grateful, and we are very lucky that in the public system, the Social Security and the health, it's incomparable. I mean, my mother can get help because she's under the poverty line. She gets very little money. She didn't have any money. Okay. But if you're not under the poverty line, you are really, it's a mess. I mean, what do you do? Here, okay, I pay for an extra insurance because I can. And then if I have operation or teeth or glasses, it might be cheaper, and everybody says, okay, you have a mutual, it's called mutuelle. Okay, whatever. But if you can pay for an extra little insurance, which is uncomparable in terms of paying that, in terms of what I was used to pay in America, already the base everyone has. And if you go to the hospital, you're taken care of. You get an operation and you don't have to sell your apartment to pay for the operation. I mean, you might pay a little thing, but definitely it's not. So I am very grateful for that. And I don't care that we pay a little bit more taxes here than there. But that already, I think here, and everybody's aware of it, we're very lucky. And also, for example, in the film, many films, not independent, but auteur films. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking the huge budget, which they do get private funding from somewhere. I don't know from where. But most films, auteur, there is this so-called National Center of Cinema, CNC, which is a government funding, where they take a part of each ticket that the person goes to the cinema, and they take a percentage, and then they put that money into helping other films. It's very difficult to have it. There are many filmmakers who try. You even have to have an oral test, no matter how famous or not famous you are. but that exists as well as government help from the different regions of France. This does not exist in America.
Nope.
Right? So in that way, I think we are, there's the social help and system it's still better here for the moment than in America.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah. Your crisis point is going to be farther down the line than us. That's why my wife and I are just like, should we move to London? Can we do TV in London?
But London is extremely expensive.
But it's the only other place that I think we could work in television.
Because you write scripts for TV?
Yeah. And my wife's a TV actor.
Okay. And so this means she can do the British accent.
Yeah.
But then it's very difficult, as you probably do know, unless you come because you have had some success in America. So you come as the American, and then they open wide the doors. Yeah. But otherwise, it is difficult. I mean, even how you're going to get to live there for the papers, because the British are also very... even before the Brexit, during the Brexit anyway, or during whenever they were part of Europe, they're very they don't like foreigners. Maybe Americans is different, but it's not easy because there are others. So how you make your place, even as a script writer, I'm saying.
Yeah. It's just, I have this, I've always had this kind of very romantic fantasy about Europe. And it just, I don't know how much of that is true or how much. I mean, my family is from, it's funny, my part of my family is from Romania. They left, all my family left before World War, I want to say II at some point.
Was your family Jewish?
Yes.
That they were lucky to, that means they knew what was going on and they left right away.
Yeah, there were pogroms and other things that they're just we should probably get out of here.
That wasn't the case with my father's family. They all died in the camp, and he survived. Mm-hmm. So they didn't realize because they were Romanian, but Jewish.
Do you know what kept them there? Was it could they see? I don't know if you know this or what your dad told you at all, but did they see everything breaking down and they're like, I don't know how to get out of here? Or
first of all, my father, he died when I was 7 years old. So he never talked about it. He barely never talked about it to my mother. I don't know if she even asked him, but the only thing he told her was that he did see his own parents being transported on some carts. And that's how he knew that they died. And they took the train. They were transported in the train to Transnistria, to this camp in Transnistria. And they got typhus and the parents died and he didn't die of typhus. And then he survived until it was in the 40s already. But still, I don't know even how many years he was in the camp. So he didn't talk to my mother at all about anything else. The one thing that I realized much later, he forced me to eat sandwiches with a lot of butter and ham and milk, but it was the butter, a lot of butter, because I was skinny and I couldn't deal with the butter. I was nauseous and he would force me to eat, and I didn't like him for that. And years later, I made a connection. Of course. I mean, for him, the food, the not seeing me too skinny, I mean, that's all connected to his experience. So what's interesting about your question, the only thing I could say is that I auditioned for this series, which I didn't get. It's an American-British series about a family at the beginning, before the war began, in Poland, and during then the beginning of the war. And because I read the script, they were talking about how they were realizing but not believing that it's possible.
Yeah.
And certainly not believing that Hitler will come here. What do they want? well, what would he do here? They were talking about Poland, but the Romanians would be the same. So I think a lot, unless you are an intellectual or something, I mean, they were intellectuals also, actually. They were not stupid. I mean, they were intellectuals, or maybe they had some store. My father, he was already a lawyer at that time because he was not that young when he went to the camp. He was much older than my mother, 18 years older. So this is why he was able to live through all that. She was younger. But anyway, she was not Jewish, my mother. She's not Jewish. So that wasn't the problem from that part of the family. But to say that, anyway, I believe in destiny. I believe that certain things are definitely destined. And so if one is destined to be able to have the awareness or a message or something to get out, they will. And if you are destined to go through that suffering and misery, you won't be able to. No matter what you might think and what you must somehow go through that for whatever reasons. So,
yeah, I can understand a fraction of that kind of feeling, like a fraction, just seeing like what life was like what life is like under COVID, where people are like, oh no, it's not a problem. And, right. And so just seeing like, just us again, and that's nothing like having a fascist, a genocidal fascist come into power. But like just seeing now where it's like, oh, it's not a big deal as people are getting sick and just like millions of people are hospitalized and dying around you. And just like, because there is this kind of like drive to just like, to want the status quo to keep going, to want everything to be normal.
That's right.
And it is so I think it's extremely it must be, because I see it around me all the time. And then for myself, everything feels surreal, and that surreal feeling, it's really kind of, I don't know how you feel about it, but like it's really such a strange feeling to be living with this kind of surreality all the time.
Yeah, you're talking surreal in terms about the COVID.
Yeah, or just about in any, again, and I'm saying this is a fraction of what it must have felt like in the 1930s, but like just this fraction of having this kind of like, we know what reality actually is like, we know what it's like, but a lot of us are denying it, and then I'm living in this in between area here where between the denial and reality in some way, if that makes sense.
Exactly, but then my question would be, what is the reality? What is your reality? What is my reality? And what is the reality we're living? I mean, my reality is that I have heat and this and that. Mm-hmm. And then I think, but it was exactly the reality. They had heat, even though they're not very rich as a country, but in Ukraine. And the reality right now for them, like this, it changed. And They have no heat. And what's strange about this thing of Ukraine is because it's, and I don't want to go too far out from whatever you wanted us to talk about, but I don't care, because I can just talk and I feel, comfortable, and I'm like, I just talk. But, I had a very, the most probably painful experience in my life was the death of my brother. He died in a car accident in Africa in 1999. And I remember being so aware at that moment that if I watched TV, and on TV there was an earthquake someplace, and I would see the people crying for their brothers, mothers, loved ones, whatever. I knew, because the experience of my brother was quite fresh, the pain that they were experiencing, because otherwise it's like, yeah, poor people, they're in suffering, but obviously I don't feel that suffering.
Right.
It remains abstract. And the same what to talk about, like Africa far away. It's even more of a movie. And so with this thing of Ukraine, when they showed in the beginning on TV or whatever, in newspapers, photographs of apartments with a piano, with this, it's like, oh, but I also have a piano. I also have books, like they have books. And there's a hole in that apartment. And the lady was saying, oh, Amazingly, the bomb didn't drop on my piano. And she was showing the journalist her piano. So their reality was a reality. How could they prepare for the reality or not prepare? So this is why my question. Then I have had friends who did not want to get vaccinated. Mm. They were looking to get the virus and be immune by getting sick because they couldn't take some yoga course or something, and it was a whole mess because you had to show that you are sick or vaccinated, and they did not want to get vaccinated. And I feel like I'm never going to judge. And I feel it's crazy because they went to such extent to get sick, and they couldn't get sick because they were, I think, type O blood.
Uh-huh.
Got sick, not so much. Mm. But it was just like, proportion. Then again, when people are dying and stuff, okay. But then again, some might have gotten vaccinated and they die anyway. So, nah.
Yeah, it's okay. So maybe let me adjust this slightly. It's a surreal feeling because there's this kind of there's a high probability of something happening that sits in the future, but it's a gray area. And so you're not exactly sure. So you want to hold on to normality and the status quo as long as possible because you're not. It's not a guarantee that this destiny is going to happen. It's just a high probability. It's like watching a Buñuel film, if that makes any sense at all. It's the same feeling in my head as watching Buñuel, as watching like The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie or something. Like that kind of thing is in my head.
Exactly. But do you feel that in this particular moment living in America?
Yes, for sure. Because the denialism here, and this is why I started off kind of asking about living in Europe, in Paris, or because I think the kind of like Reaganism and the kind of like Ayn Randian everyone's an individual and on their own, and there's no collectivity, there's no solidarity. I think that has become metastasized here to the point where it has destroyed, most kinds of communal life. And so you feel isolated and on your own. And so all that stuff, that kind of the thing you were saying, like there's this, everyone has their own little bubble reality. Again, I've romanticized Europe and I've romanticized countries that seem like they had some kind of stronger social system as a baseline. But my feeling, and I think it's not just anecdotal, I think there is probably some evidence, is that it is a little stronger there and there is a little more communal feeling. I've been to Europe, I've visited before, and it feels like there's a stronger social life there where it isn't here. And so the surreal feeling, it's a lot more intense here, I guess is what I think.
I understand now. And that is for sure. It's just interesting that when I go to visit my mother in Massachusetts, and she does live in a community, even though she's now more isolated even from that community of meditators in a Buddhist technique of meditation. That's why she moved there originally. But I always felt, unlike, I don't know if here in the countryside they do that, but when I go to Massachusetts in Shelburne Falls, and there was something wrong going on with her, or when my brother died, this was years ago, I felt like actually the community, the Americans, they get together and they want to help. I feel that the Americans, they send so much money if there's some disaster of tornadoes or a hurricane someplace in some other country, they will get together and they will send money and they will say, I don't know why I have this impression. Maybe I romanticize in the other way, but that the Americans, they have something very much like, they will have this distance of like, oh, how are you? What's up? And very nice. And they have a great day. And then you don't see them anymore. That's one side of it. But kind of when the shit hits the fan, which I love that expression, it seems like whatever friends, neighbors, this, that, they come together and they want to help. When my mother got sick okay, she was part of this community, but there are people I didn't even know that she didn't even know. And they would come and they would bring food, for example, because I didn't even realize when someone is sick, you have so many things to do that you cannot even cook. And so people bring food. I don't know in France, in the countryside, if they would do that. I don't know. But as a government and the social thing that has been put into place after, I think, the war, that's for sure a different story. That's for sure, it's a different story. And I think with the COVID and people getting sick in the hospital and doctors, I don't even know what's going on in America with that. What happens with the people who are in the hospital for months if they don't have money to pay?
They go into debt, and that's that. And then
and they go to the prison if they cannot pay the money.
Well, it looks like that's starting to happen again. Like, I thought debtor's prison was something from Victorian England, but apparently people are getting arrested now for not paying bills. It's not all over, but it's still, few and far between. So I don't think it's an epidemic of this kind of stuff, but it's enough. You see little stories here and there where you did not before. And so you're like, huh. But I think you're right. I think in a crisis, but it takes a crisis. I think that's the problem, is that daily life here feels isolating. And a crisis is an opportunity to not feel isolated.
Yes.
And people don't feel like they have that opportunity to reach out to everyone unless it is a crisis.
Yeah. But it's funny because when you mention isolation, I cannot help but think that especially you are in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, even though I never lived there, I did go a few times to work. And this is why I could never, I have friends who are not in the business of cinema, and I understand, and the writers, again, script writers, it's in the business of cinema, but maybe different. Anyway, the friends who are not in the business of cinema understand why they live in Los Angeles, for the benefits of nature. And it seems like the standard of living, it's easier, cheaper than New York City. Then I don't know about other big cities like Chicago or something like that. But I did not like this feeling of isolation in the car in Los Angeles.
Yep.
So when you talk about Los Angeles, but also probably most towns in America, because they're so most of them are. But then again, in New York, now in Manhattan, at least, they're only rich people. This is what I tell some friends whom I go and visit, say, no, New York is great. But really, New York was very expensive before, but now it's impossible. And now, after the COVID, the only thing remind me of the 80s and 90s in New York are the homeless people. I don't know what the situation is now, but a year ago or 2 years ago when I was in Manhattan, I saw that. And it was like I was in the 80s again. But in New York now, the isolation is that the rich are in their whatever, and the poor, they go 2 hours away from New York. And they come in the city to work, but I guess it's another sort of isolation, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, Los Angeles, for me, when you talk about isolation, I think, yeah, for sure, it makes sense, because in Los Angeles, you are really isolated in your car and you're not really connected to the other one.
Yeah. And there's not a lot of cities that are like New York, right? So most of America is this kind of like isolating experience. There's New York, there's San Francisco, New Orleans, yes. Chicago. I think there's like a handful of those.
Yeah.
And LA is much like, just because LA is has a large population doesn't make it a city necessarily. It's like the rest of the country.
Totally, because to me, LA was when the first time I went there, and I couldn't even drive, but I felt like I was from one suburb to another. Mm-hmm. Connected by the highways and gas stations, but it's like one suburb connected to another. So yeah.
It's a Frankenstein suburb.
Exactly. Yeah. But you're right in terms of this surreal, like especially if you with the fear, with the insecurity, with the hopes, with the whatever, it creates something. What I feel, I don't know, I wouldn't say surreal, but I feel a tension, at least in Paris. I feel, and the tension always goes up before the holidays because everybody's shopping like crazy or trying to run. But I feel a tension. I feel something that it is not pleasant all around in an energy of the
Yeah.
people. I think people are afraid. I think people are really afraid and really, how can I say, the life has become more difficult. The life has become much more expensive, even
Yeah.
for food and things. And we don't know when how it's going to change still, and if it's going to be over, because I haven't looked at the news for like quite a while now, but I guess the war is still continuing, right, in Ukraine. It's not over, right?
No, not yet, as far as I know.
Just in case, because I didn't look at the news. So
Yeah. I know
but,
Russia's not doing well. That's the only thing I really know in the back of my head. But it is, you're right,
but
that
the
tension.
actors,
Yeah. There's that tension. Again, there's that thing. I'm holding my hand up as some kind of illustration, but like that tension is that thing hanging in the future. And you're like, well, I don't know. It's not definite, but there's a probability. There's like a high probability, it's always a probability that's over 50%. So it's just like, it's hanging there. And so you're not sure, so it's like, it's this whole sort of Damocles type existential mode of being, if that makes any sense at all.
Of course.
Yeah.
But as I imagine you in Los Angeles, I think, oh, but there's still sun and probably not very cold. And does that help?
Yes, a little bit. But I'm curious because you grew up in communist Romania. I'm wondering if there was any feeling of solidarity at all that permeated culture at that point, or was it not as Soviet? Like, did the Soviet nature of Russia not really, of the USSR, sorry, at the time, not like go into the rest of the countries that were part of the kind of Eastern Bloc?
No, it was. It's funny because yesterday we were watching a documentary on Czech cinema. Great documentary on Czech cinema on this TV station here in France called Arte. It's like the more cultural TV station. And they, at a certain point, they had these images of the revolt in Prague and the Russian tanks coming in and breaking it down. I know there's a name and I forgot it, if it was the Spring of Prague. I think it was in 1968. So I was only 2 years old in Romania. I know in Romania at some point we heard about Polish, not Czechoslovakians, but Polish doing strikes and being brought down, not by Russians, but in general. Romanians never, they were too afraid. But I think all those countries were under the USSR's foot. And this is why I'm giving the example of this Spring of Prague or whatever in 1968, where there was a revolt and they were brought down because the Russian tanks came into Prague. And to show that, no, you stop it. And to make an example, probably they kill people, to make an example to the other countries as well. So I think you have to understand, I lived in Romania until I was 14. I left when I was 14. We were lucky to leave before everything got horrible. And also we were lucky that we were able to leave because thanks to Jimmy Carter. Because when Reagan became president, then it changed. They didn't receive anymore as many immigrants, I think. And so in Romania, as almost still a child and not yet a teenager, I would not really, I could not say there was a solidarity or you had to be extremely close and talk about things and not be afraid that someone will talk and report you to the Securitate. I think because of the fear, when there's a lot of fear, I think the feeling of community and coming together, it's less. I don't know. Maybe it's a bad analogy I'm making, but I think that when one is afraid, one tends to be me, and not in me. How I will escape, how I will get the food, how I will do this, and how I can get around to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think that, and again, I only know about the Soviet Union and during the communist years from documentaries or from reading books or things like that. So I don't, that's why I'm curious, like, what was the reality of life, and it seems like you're saying it was this constant kind of fear of there were good things obviously about, about the Soviet Union in the sense of like, life expectancy went up. There was something. I'm not defending anything, but I'm saying that like there were some good things like that. But like the constant kind of like the way you're describing it, the constant worry about someone informing on you kind of dwarfs a lot of other things.
Oh, of course, already not just informing, but if for example, they would call you up, not children but adults, and they would say you better whether you wanted or not, you would have to become part of the Communist Party. You could not say no, I don't want to join in. You had to when Ceausescu would pass in the street, there were documentaries made on that, and there you see many people, like in any country, whether it's in China or whatever, and everybody like, hurrah, hurrah, like welcoming the president or saying hello to the president or to the, I don't know who is passing. All those people in the middle of the winter, children in our sort of uniform of pioneer, or my mother was in the ballet opera, in the ballet. She was a ballerina and teacher, and all the dancers or whatever, even singers, you had to go and stay for 3 hours in the cold in order to say the Communist Romanian Party, Ceausescu, the Communist Romanian Party. They weren't giving a shit about this. I mean, they wanted to be home and not in the cold, but you had no choice. And it's all fake. It's all fake. I think in China, or well, maybe in China, I don't know, but in North Korea, for sure it's fake, because these people are afraid for their life. They cannot not do whatever propaganda or whatever we see them. If we see a lot of people cheering for the guy, then again, the other side of so-called communism and socialistic ideas and Marxist ideas that my father was really, and he was disappointed, I think, that he saw the system changing before his death. But before, it was his goal in terms of Marxistic ideas, and especially with his experience as a survivor from the camps. It's true that in that time, everybody could take 1 month vacation and they were paid for. Everybody had, whether they were good or not, but doctor and medical things, even though they were not great, but let's say there were. There were the differences in the status of how much money you had and did, and this were not enormous, like what happens in capitalism, and especially what happens in countries that go from dictator to a sort of opening up. Immediately there's those archimillionaires, and then the others who can be doctor, veterinarian, and not be able to buy a car. which was the case for many years in Romania, because I have my only Romanian childhood friend, Nicola, who's a veterinarian, and so poor. And I'll say to her, wow, because in America or in France, to be a veterinarian, you're rich, you're a doctor, and you can at least have a car if you want a car.
Uh-huh.
And she couldn't for many years. So in any case, obviously, to talk about, what was good, but the fear, the terror that everybody was under in terms of adults, that's why my mother left, because she did not want us to become adults and to live through that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why she left. That's why she took it was a chance and danger, and she left alone. She didn't know when she was going to get us, because she went with a ballet contract for 1 year in Ecuador, South America. And from there, she crossed, hiding herself. She bought a ticket so nobody would see her from this company in Quito, because they would have reported her to the Romanian embassy. But she was able to get a ticket and an invitation to enter the United States. And once she got to the United States, she asked for political asylum. There was a lawyer, friend of friend, a Romanian lawyer, who made her papers, who received her, and then she tried, to work and to get some money and to pay a rent in Queens, and then begin the whole process of asking for her children and for her mother to join her. So she didn't know how long that was going to take, and we were very lucky that once she arrived in America, it only took 1 year. Because other families in the exact same situation, they could have waited, a mother or father could have waited for 10 years, because the communists, they didn't want to let them go.
Right.
Just to make the other one suffer. But we were lucky, for whatever, it's our destiny, that we were lucky to leave within 1 year after she. So we were separated for 2 years. Yeah. But my mother is the hero in this story, because she took that amazing chance. Because I don't know if you have children. I don't have my own children, but I have stepchildren now. But I'm thinking like, wow, what is to leave your children and not know when you will see them again?
Was daily life that bad, or was it just like, her feeling like, again, like maybe like from your father, like kind of like feeling pieces of World War II in her head, and seeing kind of like signs in Bucharest of like, oh, well, this is kind of similar, like Ceausescu, like life under Ceausescu is a little bit similar to that. So maybe there's something coming that I don't want my family to be part of. I don't know. I'm just trying to like figure out like that kind of like that feeling that would push you to like take that trip, and then have to have to sneak out of Ecuador into America. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Obviously, many people, she knew many other dancers who would escape and defect through, if they would go to Germany in a tour, or if they would. Her story is very particular, because years before she left to Ecuador, she was going with a ballet to Greece. And she was stopped at the airport. And she was brought into an office where this guy from Securitate said to her, "Madam, we have to stop you. We cannot let you go to Greece, because we have to punish you because of your brother." Because my mother's brother defected from Romania through Paris years before into United States, where he still lives today. And supposedly her brother never paid a fee, like when you break something. I don't know in English anymore, but it's like you have to pay for the fact you defected, like a punishment fee. Okay? And he never did. I mean, who would? You'll defect and then you're going to send, I don't know how much money to Romania. It's like, okay. And this is why. And she looked at him because she was very strong character. And she said, oh, so you consider, like, for example, if your sister would have defected, you consider it is right that you would have to pay for the action of your sister? That was the end of that story. She came back home. I think the situation was getting worse and worse. It was not yet the misery that they lived through after 1980, because you could still find food. Of course, since I was a child, I had to stay in line for milk. It was normal. You would stay half an hour in line to buy a bottle of milk. And of course, bananas, we had only 1 kilo allowed per person in the winter. And it was like, oh my God, it was like, I don't know, not necessarily caviar for me, but just like incredible. But yeah. So, but it's kind of normal. You get used to those sort of things. So life was not that bad yet. After we left, my friend said to me they didn't, at a certain point before the revolution, they didn't even have soap to wash themselves with. We're not talking about heat and other things, soap. So it got very, very bad. And already in the stores, there was maybe less food. Like you would go into a store and on the shelves they were full, but there was only salt. But not so bad yet. It was bad, but okay. And when they came to her, because there was someone else supposedly from the opera who was supposed to leave to Ecuador. And this person, for a reason, said no or couldn't. And they came to her, even though she was like the bad one with a brother defector. And what was interesting, she had to have let's say, the green light from 2 members of Securitate. So one member was like a friend of hers who said, we can make her go. We can let her go for this job. And the other was the same man that 5 years before stopped her at the airport, because he thought about it and he wanted to say, I'm sorry. So he signed the paper saying, we can let her go as a member of the Communist Party. We don't risk anything. We let her go for 1 year to Ecuador to work, because it was like an exchange between the ballet company of Quito and the opera in Bucharest. I think my mother, she knew when she left, she knew that she would not come back. I think she took that as an open door. And this is what she said to me. She said she didn't do it for herself, but somehow she did it for us. Maybe in her subconscious, she felt it would get worse. Or maybe she didn't even know, but she felt like this is the moment and I have to take it. And maybe her subconscious guided her with a sort of conviction that in the end, everything would be okay. Because sometimes we do things and we don't even know why we do them, but we are guided from within somehow. And if we don't do them because we're too afraid, this means we shouldn't do them. This is what I thought later for me. How could I imagine I could become an actress? And I had an accent, and my Romanian aunt, meaning the wife of my uncle, who used to be an actress in Romania. And obviously, when they got to America, they were no longer. My uncle, too, was an actor. She said to me when I was 15 and in America, she said, but what do you imagine? What do you imagine that you'll be able to do acting here in this country? You're crazy. My mother always supported me, always believed in us. And if we wanted to do something artistic. But this woman, because she was bitter, I was 15 and I knew I wanted to probably study acting. But she said this to me, you're crazy. You are going into a wall. She said this and I told her, yes, I will. Like, I don't know, but I will. And then in high school, there was this drama club teacher. He was the one who asked me this, said to me, but what do you think? You say you want to be an actress. You think that someone will just knock at your door and invite you in a film? This is the teacher of the drama club. Again, I'm 15 or maybe 16. I don't know. But I was really maybe 14. I was beginning the high school there. I don't know. And I said, no, but someone will see me in a play and then ask me to be in a film. And this is what happened. Hal Hartley saw me in 2 plays that I was doing in, I don't know, 89 or 90 with Travis Preston, who I met at NYU, who was my teacher and then with whom I worked a lot in theater. And Hal Hartley saw me in 2 plays of Travis and asked me to do a short film, Theory of Achievement, and then Simple Man. Mm-hmm. And this is how I began in cinema. So I'm giving this example because intellectually, I didn't know what I was talking about. I couldn't have any assurance. People even later would ask me, but how could you imagine that you could do something with an accent and this? And I never thought. I mean, I never crossed my mind the difficulty of it all. But my subconscious knew that I had to go, that I would have to follow, that I would have to continue with my wish. My subconscious knew that things were set up for me. This I'm sure about.
Did the desire to act, did that form in America, or was that something that had formed already in you when you were younger?
I don't know. I think it was not formed. I think I was born with it. And I have 2 examples. First example was when I was like 5 years old. The first film I remember that I saw in cinema was Mary Poppins. And I came out of the cinema and my mother, she told me, she said, "You are crying." And she asked me, "Why are you crying?" And I said to her, "I want to be the girl in the film, the little girl in the film." And I was crying because I was frustrated that I was not the little girl in the film. Maybe because also I wanted to jump into the animated sequences and things like this. But it was this feeling that I wanted to be that little girl who was doing all that stuff in the film. And I think, okay, that was 5 years old. And 7 years old when my father died. And my father died in the hospital. I didn't go to see him because my mother didn't want us to go and see him. He died of cancer. And they told me he died. And I was an orphan now, kind of half orphan. And that kind of made me sad. And I was sad, I guess he died, but relieved also, but sad. And I felt this emotion coming up and tears. And what did I do? I went in front of a mirror and I started to act and do a monologue like in a film. And the monologue was not about my father. I was inventing a story, but using the tears and looking at myself as an actress, like in a film with tears, talking and living through an emotion, using an emotion, painful emotion, but putting it in the service of acting.
Do you know what that impulse was?
Just to make believe with the tears. I remember, but it was probably to use those tears in a sort of make believe like the actresses I could see in films. This is what I mean. I could not have told you that I wanted to be an actress maybe at 7 years old, but this is what I did. So it's like it was already something in me.
When you saw Mary Poppins, do you remember like what the allure was? Was it just that this is a larger than life fantasy that you want to be part of? Was it that there was some kind of like attention that the actors were getting and everyone's eyes were on them? Like, what was it about that moment that kind of that's so present in you that you remember it today?
Yeah. I don't know if this is imagination or remembrance, because obviously you can imagine it's been 51 years. 51 years ago.
Yeah.
But if I try to go into the mind of the 5-year-old in me, I think I was aware that it was something that was not, it wasn't like I knew that those people were doing something. I think I had the consciousness that they were actors. It wasn't like I was looking at this thinking that's like a fantasy thing and I want to be in that fantasy. No, I think I had the consciousness because I remember looking at films at home with my father who would read the subtitles for us. So we were watching in the evening a film on TV and the westerns and stuff. So I had the consciousness already that these people are working, are doing something in this setup of fantasy and beauty, and they are flying around. So I think my desire was that I wanted to be part of that world. But that world, as that little girl, I didn't want to be Mary Poppins. I wasn't crying because I wanted to be Mary Poppins, who would be the magician. I wanted to be that little girl, I think, because I felt like... But certain things like this, we cannot really explain them.
Yeah. I mean, I try.
They're mysterious.
This is such this show is admittedly psychologically reductive to the point it's like, I don't ever think that there is a linearity to any of this stuff, but I project the linearity onto the conversation as if it is like, I saw this thing here and now I'm an actor, or this thing happened when I was young and now this. I don't really believe that. But there is something like, you do have that in the back of your head as you grow up, as you progress as a human being. There is that little seed, and what I'm always interested in is, well, what makes you then pursue it, as opposed to someone who also has that seed but doesn't. Right. That's the thing that I'm always very curious about. Like, what sends you off in one trajectory where another person that might, there might be someone that has your exact same background that just didn't.
Or did it or didn't do it. This is where, for me, there is something, very plain and not plain about my what I believe in. But I think it's predestined. Okay, so I'm someone who I truly believe that this is not the only life I live. I don't necessarily think that I just have human lives. I think I could also be incarnated as an animal or no body, meaning no physical body, spirit of some kind, or lower beings. Okay, so this is from Buddhism, philosophy and writings, but it's something I've always felt since I was a child, and nobody told me to think like that. But I felt like I've always felt that. I remember I was 9 years old or 10, and I read a book that my mother kind of passed on to me, who talked about spirits, blue and red spirits. I don't know what mystical type of book. I believed everything. I believed. It wasn't like I was, I don't believe this, or this is fairy tale. I believed it made sense to me. And then with life, I've seen how I have been guided to meet certain people who took me to a certain place, and from that place, but of course, I have to do the actions to go from A to B and study acting and not be in my bed thinking, oh, that director will knock at my door. Obviously not. But I was guided with a confidence, and that confidence, I don't know where it came from, that I would be an actress. Despite the fact that I was a foreigner, I had an accent always, I never worked on my accent, that I didn't have any connections, and that I was in an ocean of actors. Because I remember when I did get my equity card, because I did 2 or 1 professional play, and I was very proud. Now I have my equity card. And now, at the time in New York, there was this newspaper called Backstage Magazine, where they posted a lot of audition calls for theater. So I thought, now I have my equity card, because before if you're not in equity, you cannot go to those auditions. And it's like a catch-22, and you never know how you're going to get your equity card or how you're going to get your SAG, whatever. Finally, everybody has their own story, how they do it. So I decided, I chose something that I thought, oh, maybe I could be good for this. And I decided to go to this audition because now I was in equity. And I arrived, the audition started at 10, and I thought, okay, I'm going to arrive at 9:30. I arrived at 9:30, and the audition was, I think, at the Equity Building, Actors Equity Building. The line was between 6th and 7th Avenue, not between 42nd and 43rd Street or 44th Street, between 6th and 7th Avenue. And I looked at that line, and I thought, first of all, they were not looking for a foreigner. So already I was going to this audition thinking, okay, I have an accent, but I'll try. All those people in the line had the equity card. So they were like, oh my God, all these actors. And I thought to myself, this is not my road. Because I knew that if I stayed in line, and then later anyway, I found out that they already have the actors, but they're, by law, they have to publish the auditions in the paper. But in fact, they'll never choose actors from that line because they already have their actors, okay? But where did that come from, that saying this will not be the way I'll be doing it? I don't know how I'll do it, but it's not going to be like this. And I left. I thought, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to stay in a line from 6th to 7th Avenue for an audition. Because I didn't have an agent at that moment. So it was my only way of going to auditions. I don't know where that sort of confidence or sort of thing was, that it would not be my way.
Were you that confident when you were growing up in Bucharest? Or is that something or did something change in you when you moved here? Or a third possibility. It doesn't have to be binary.
Well, yeah. I don't know if I was that confident in Bucharest. I grew up with a lot of fear, under a lot of fear. I'm actually, school was extremely difficult, and the teachers, most of them were like policemen.
Oh.
But I was a very good student, and they never hit me. But like policemen, police state. That was school. My mother was very disciplinarian. So I had a lot of fear. I was afraid for exams. I was afraid for many things. And I'm still afraid of authority. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid to upset someone. So the confidence I felt in Romania was if I felt loved and like in a sort of security, love security. So I felt confident because I felt that the only moments when my mother was happy was when we're on vacation. Even today, I feel confident to eat as much as I want to, and I don't care if I put on weight when I'm on vacation. And then I suffer after. If I get fat, I suffer after. But at least on vacation, I'm going to eat all the ice creams, and I'll just be confident to be fully living everything and not being afraid of getting fat, getting this, getting that, whatever. And then I was confident when I did my first play when I was 7 years old in school. I was confident on stage. I was very confident on stage. And that confidence is when I'm acting in those projects that I appreciate and admire, because obviously as actors, I also act in certain things that not that I detest, but things that I think they're weaker, but I need to work. So this is why I'll never call myself an artist, because an artist in the true word and sense of artist for me, as a creator of a work, they should not sacrifice certain things that are about their artistic integrity. But an actor, we do what we can. Now, a scriptwriter for TV, they have probably their agenda. But if you really consider yourself an artist, like in the true sense of a creator, you at a certain point you cannot go over a certain a border.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actors have also their own borders, but it's more like sand moving, because we have to survive. And I will do something that one might think is great, and I think, no, it's actually not so great for what I deeply would like to do. But deeply what I would like to do, first of all, might not pay at all. And then I would not work most of the time. So as an actor,
yes. I mean, that's been my struggle for my entire adult life is what is the line? I don't come from money. So it's like, well, it's not like I can. This is the thing. I think I hear exactly what you're saying because I feel exactly what you're feeling. I know it is. And I have to tell myself that I think that definition of art, of capital A art, was created by people who had money and could afford. And there are some people, like there are obviously like artists, like amazing artists who were willing to live in debt and penury to fulfill their art. Yeah. I don't know if I could do that, and maybe that does make me maybe on the hierarchy of art I am lower down on the totem pole because I'm just not I want to have dinner. I'm just not willing to to not have dinner.
And that's okay as long as we are happy with what we with what we do, because it's not as if I put more value in someone who will be a David Lynch or someone who will do the Batman or the last Superman. If that person even is able to do the success of Batman, Superman, and all the others, already it's a rare thing, because it's not easy to do that either. And if they're happy with what they're doing, well, that's the most important.
Yeah.
And David Lynch is able to do David Lynch.
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking of like a writer and also who did some films, Charlie Kaufman, because I don't think it's that easy for him. He might have money from his family, but I don't think that it's really easy for him to do what he does. Or maybe it's easier in America than it would be in France, but it's hard stuff that he's trying to do, a Charlie Kaufman, in my opinion, in terms of a writer.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but it's all. But all I'm saying is me as an actress, because I don't have problems saying actress. I don't have to say actor because I just know that actors are like in French is artisan. It's like a cabinet maker. It's artisan. It's like. I don't know the word in English. There must be a word. It's not the auteur necessarily.
It's a skill.
And again, it's a skill. It's a skill, and we are dependent on the script and on the director also in terms of film and also in theater. But this is why I don't judge. And then I remember this anecdote that. I used to know. I mean, I'm friends with the ex-husband of Julianne Moore.
Mm-hmm.
He used to be an actor. Now he's a theater director. And I remember Julianne at the time. I knew her, and we were doing theater with a group of friends and company with Travis Preston and all this. And her ex-husband was in it, and she was a little bit afraid because she was doing soap opera. And she was afraid of like, they probably don't really look, they might look down on me because I'm doing soap and they're doing this great avant-garde theater. And maybe some of us would look down on her of the soap opera because it wasn't so art. And finally, I thought years later, look at her destiny. And would you have liked to do soap opera and then get to her destiny? So we should never judge soap opera or not soap opera. I'm saying one should never judge, because we never know what sort of a writer, actor, director, whatever. It's in time that we can say. So in time, maybe an actor is author of his own body of work in time.
I love that.
Okay,
I love that.
Like a Michel Piccoli,
Yeah.
this French actor who died. You look at the body of work he did, and I can say he's an artist in his choice and luck, but choices of work, of directors, of films, yeah, but not at my stage. And I'm okay with it. I don't care. But this is why I don't call myself an artist. But what I know is that as an actress, in those projects where I like and I really appreciate the art behind it, and even if I don't appreciate so much the art behind it, I feel confident. It's the only place in my life where I feel vertical and standing on my feet where I'm supposed to stand. And I'm not going to be afraid to say what I think, or if I need something, afraid that I might upset someone. No, I won't be. In life, I don't want conflict. I don't want to upset. So I'm going to lie. I'm going to go around. Blah, blah, blah. When I'm acting and I need something, I'm going to ask for it, or I'm going to say, hey, concentrate. Here, you're not concentrating and we need concentration in order to do this, or whatever. But I feel myself exactly where I'm supposed to be. And then that's the confidence I feel, which I don't usually feel in general in life.
Okay, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Let me throw, again, admittedly psychologically reductive. That's just the preface. But two things that make me think that, okay, here's where you can become, here's why you feel confident in these contexts. One, this is a stretch. This is a complete stretch. But the idea of like being confident on a holiday, being in a production is kind of a holiday from your life, right? In a certain sense, like whether it's theater, whether it's film, right? It's a complete, like the minute you walk on a set or the minute you walk on stage, right? You are in this total different context that's different from your life. It's like a holiday. Analogy.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Excellent. I never thought about it. Excellent.
Again, psychologically reductive. But and the other thing is, I'm wondering if like living in fear for so long, right? Your first 14 years of your life, you kind of have this fear on you. It was almost like, when swimmers are training and they wear weights on their legs, and then to make it more difficult, and then when they take the weights off, they swim faster.
I didn't know that.
I wonder, again, totally reductive, just so we're all clear, but I wonder if that fear kind of is analogous to that, so that when you move here, it's gone, and you are a freer person, or you feel like a freer, because to act is to be a good actor like you are, is to be free. Right. There has to be that kind of freedom in you to be able to do what you do.
Yes.
So
yes.
again, I don't know. I think at the very least, I've hooked on to, I may not have captured truth, but I've glimpsed a little bit of it.
But I love it because you open up some little glimpses into myself and my psyche. And I find that very interesting and very, quite possible true. And it's true that this thing of fear, it's very interesting what you say. I'm gonna really have to think about it. I'm gonna re-listen and I'm gonna think about it, because it's quite amazing.
Yeah, because I know that's why I'm not a good actor, is because I'm too afraid. I'm constantly afraid I can of if it's not exactly what I want it to be, and then
you're afraid of you're afraid of the look upon you, of the watching upon you.
Yes, I'm afraid of vulnerability. To be totally true. To be totally honest, it's being that vulnerable in front of other people. If it's not my wife, yeah.
And I love to be vulnerable because they don't know that it's me. Because I process that vulnerability and me through a character. But you out there, you don't know. You think it's that I'm composing a character. And I'm actually composing with everything I have inside of me. And so for me, it's a release. And also, I love being watched upon. Whether it's the camera, I love the camera on me. Even getting older, I still love it. I'm like, fuck it, whatever. This is my face. I'm not gonna do operations. It's not as like nice aesthetically as when I was young, but I'm accepting, and I still love that camera. Like in Sunset Boulevard. I love that, and then I love also the audience. If I like what I'm doing, I love that energy of those people watching me. And this is why I'm saying, when I act, the first person that I want to give pleasure is to me, not to you. Then if you have pleasure, all the better. And also because it's not my text, it's not my direction, so okay. But it's me. It's what pleasure I feel by doing it. Whether it's the pleasure in being free somehow of worries, of stresses, of life, of fears, of this, of that. I don't know. Imagination, being in another. But it's me first. And then, of course, it's my pleasure to give you pleasure. But after my pleasure.
That actually seems like a brilliant place to end. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for getting in touch and asking me to be part of your show. And I listened to some other ones with your wife, and I think they're excellent.
Oh,
so
thank
I will
you.
keep on listening to them, and all the best for your writing.
Oh, thanks. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, oh, 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 bye.